One of the things I did like about the English guy, he's a bit like a bear. They call him a barbarian, Anjin. It gave him this bear-like sort of look, and everything's a bit scary for him. In this, he's not a sympathetic character at all. Very brash, impulsive person who's trying to not sound like the pirate that he really is to save his own life. He's not a bad person, but he's not a goody by any means. But he changes gradually, bit by bit, to be more sensitive, more understanding of what's going on through Mariko and through Fuji. And the other characters around him that he sympathises with. He begins to get an understanding of the kind of people they are, even though he can't understand what they're saying. The European way of life, by contrast, is perhaps something more understandable to him as an Englishman. Because the civilizations would have grown differently, but at the same kind of pace. Somewhere like Japan would have been so extraordinarily different to him. What he would see as a civilized city, even though when he's asked about England, he talks about London and says it's basically a load of crap. It's ghastly, it's smelly, the streets smell, people smell, blah, blah, blah. But then he realises it's a Japanese wash. They bathe more frequently than he does. And so that allows him to question, hang on, if I've got presumptions about these people being savages, they've got presumptions about me being a barbarian. So he knows that there's this missing link between the two peoples, which is understanding. Because if the Japanese don't have an understanding of what the British culture is like, anybody that's coming from there, they will see as perhaps an enemy automatically. But then the English guy coming might say, well, you're killing each other with swords, you're beheading each other, you're a bunch of lunatics, what's going on? But of course he has to learn why people honour each other, why people will do anything, give their lives for the lord of their own kingdom. So difficult to get his head around it, and of course he hasn't got a language to understand. So he has to read what he can with his eyes, see what he can, and then rely on his translator to give him honest information. He doesn't even know if that's true. So it's a lot going on, a lot to absorb. His English was quite different in the scripted form as Anjin, as the barbarian. But it's the pronunciation that I noticed when he was being interviewed, because he doesn't sound his T's very much. So he might say commit, like that. Whereas if he was on the screen, he'd say, but I committed to that. It's very much what Richard Burton, who's a famous English actor, married to Elizabeth Taylor. If you heard the voice, you might think, why do I recognise that voice? But if you didn't see the face, you wouldn't necessarily know it's the same person.
Yeah, totally different, isn't it?
But he's an actor.
Yeah, he did so well.
He's a great character, and he's a shambles, really, isn't he? He doesn't really know what he's doing half the time, but he's great, and he's got a sense of humour. I guess that's kind of survival technique.
Yeah.
He laughs things off. I want to sort of mention things, but I don't want to spoil it. But he's constantly renewing his will.
That was funny.
Because as soon as he's made a will, something else happens. And, oh, hang on, new will. When he comes on, there's a bit of lightheartedness in his character, but he doesn't play it for laughs. It's not that he's got funny lines particularly. He's just a funny guy trying to survive. I think that was immensely difficult. He's definitely after power.
Sorry?
Definitely after power. He's greedy.
After power, yeah, okay.
And he knows that Toranaga is dangerous. I think he knows that Toranaga is smarter than he is, Ishido. Ishido isn't stupid, but he doesn't have the vision of Toranaga. And he knows this. And everything is a power game. There. I don't think he has the same ability to feel sadness when people die. Whereas Toranaga, if somebody near him dies, it upsets him greatly. And just once or twice, you can see that in his eyes, but he has to hold it down, that it's really hurt him. And you don't get that from Ishido. Ishido is very superficial in lots of ways. He's clever, but he's not highly intelligent.
Mariko,
Ah,
how did you feel about her?
I know, it's a stunning performance. So consistent all the way through. And a very difficult character, because as we were expressing just now, she's the translator, interpreter. And so she has to play a slightly different role with each person. If it's a Portuguese priest, she's being one thing because she has been converted to Christianity. So that changes her a little bit. She's completely loyal to Toranaga, but she also has connections with Anjin, the barbarian who comes ashore, who I'm related to. And so she has got all these different roles to play, but she is also integral to the story, and she is trusted by Toranaga. And she's no fool at all. She knows exactly what's going on. She can read Toranaga in the way that one of his closest friends can read him, but they are perhaps the only two who really understand what he's about.
Yeah.
And they never let on, they never discuss it, they never talk to anybody else about it, but they know. She, as a Japanese female of that period, this face is very impassive. It's not telling you anything, just sometimes her eyes will flick to the right or to the left when she hears something, not sure about that. And then she'll look down again. So you know it's made quite an impression, or it's caught her ear to some degree. And because the Englishman is so different, his thought processes work differently. And often he thinks, excuse me, I won't swear necessarily, but what is going on? Why don't you just pick up that and go and do that? And there's all this talk and then nothing happens. And he's getting really frustrated, and she just waits for him to finish. That's not how it happens. And she calms everything down. She defuses him so many times. But then if you see her with a weapon in her hands, she'll fight to the death. I think there's probably a massive amount of intellect behind those brains, within those brains, but it's just not shown.
Yeah.
So the quietness I see is that the famous thing about the ducks. The ducks can look so serene on the surface of the water, but underneath they're paddling like mad to get along. So it's not really like that, but you know inside a lot of stuff is going on, but they don't have to let it show.
Do you remember Fuji?
Yeah, she's the one who is the consort to the
became
Anjin.
a consort of Anjin.
Yeah, Anjin. I thought that was a really interesting role. If someone's acting alongside the character of Mariko, it's very difficult to make that difference without trying to be a louder actor or actress. In a way, you try less to make the character more sympathetic, because Mariko is very beautiful in this. She's very strong, very determined, very single-minded, and she also manipulates to a great degree with the language, the interpretations, and that sort of thing. Fuji, she's a really good counterbalance for Mariko.
Do you remember he is a best friend of Toranaga?
I couldn't remember his name, but I thought that's who you meant. So his role, again, is very difficult because he can't make the ultimate decision, but he can have great concerns that he doesn't want his boss to die. And he is so loyal that he has to make a really life-changing decision at the end by saying, look, if you do this, the only way I can honour you is to kind of disagree with my life by putting my life on the line. And that's a really strong scene. It's a very, very upsetting scene.
Yeah.
And what I really respect about the script and the production direction, the team, the writers, the director, doesn't hold back. If this is going to be a really upsetting episode, we have to show you why it's upsetting and how upsetting it is. And they don't say, yeah, now we're going to change scene and show you something funny, just to take the level up a bit lighter. They say this is how important it is that these people feel they've got to take this course of action, and you sit there and watch them go through it, and you feel that you've kind of connected, that it's exhausting watching it in a way,
isn't it?
because but that's a good thing, because it shows that emotionally you're connected, you're affected by what happens. So I think it tells you a lot about yourself when you watch a scene like that. I only brought this down so I can remind myself of the lady's name, Kaoru Takanura, Lady Joker, which I'm reading. I'm nearly finished this one, and you brought me the second volume. Quite a thick book, as you can see. One of the things that's coming through quite strongly is that there's a corporation, and somebody is put in a position where they have to decide where their honour lies. And he starts to question himself. I've been a sort of salary man, corporation man, for most of my life. But this situation is making me have to decide whether I'm prepared to make this sacrifice for the company. And his big question is, would the company make this kind of sacrifice for me? This is quite different, obviously, and more contemporary. Reminded me of Shogun, the commitment that people make to the cause. So you honour your lord, and your honour carries with it the probability, not just the possibility, of death on behalf of your lord. That's how far your honour takes you. And this person has to make a decision. Am I prepared to give my honour to the company and pretend that certain things didn't happen, to lie to the police, to lie to the company themselves, to keep the company out of trouble? Or am I true to myself and say, but the company wouldn't do this for me. The company would turn its back on me if they felt I was going to put the company in a bad position. So he's got a decision to make. And I thought it's actually interesting that even on a contemporary situation like this, and that the storyline is borrowed from true events, although the actual situation is different and the backdrop is different, its honour still comes through and still means so much. So it's not life ending. Relating that to the honour that people felt in the 1600s in Japan, it's still there in society as a backdrop. It happens in a different way. But if you are dishonoured in some way, it stays with you. It hits you very deep. And this is a cultural thing, I feel, quite a lot. I would think a lot of perhaps your parents would have been in part of the era that honour was still in society, in local communities and so on, was a massive thing, that you would want to be seen to be an honourable person, to help the community and so on. And if you did something dishonourable, it would be dishonour on your whole household. It would be a shadow hanging over you forever. And I think something, I suppose the English equivalent would have been, children grew up to be seen but not heard, so that you didn't make a noise. You were only seen by the parents if the parents asked you to come into the room, sort of thing. Otherwise, the children hardly existed. You're brought up properly, and if you break that, they'd say, well, I'm sorry, you've got to leave home. I don't want you in the house if you can't be my child, if you're going to act like that, because it reflects on me, my honour and the way I'm respected in the community. Things have changed, of course, since this book was written, and obviously since Shogun, the period that it was enacted. But it's still there, and it shows through really strongly in this book. And it's a reminder that this is probably still, to a great degree, in the psyche of the Japanese people. And even in the young people, even school kids, when passing through a station or whatever, if I step aside to let somebody walk by, little girls just a little nod, just kind of saying thank you, sort of nod. Yeah. And it's those things carry through. I don't know how long they'll be in the Japanese society, hopefully forever, because I think it's really good. It keeps you grounded. It reminds you what honour and what respect is all about, even to people you don't know. Interesting to see in Lady Joker but that was still such a strong theme. Everybody within the company is concerned about the honour, even if they're not necessarily honourable people themselves. That's the way they have to present themselves. And that's what comes through. That's the core of what's happening in Shogun as well. I could say the English have, certainly in the past history and up until this point, a sort of respectful approach and attitude to other people. And I think that is possibly, my feeling anyway, that it's possibly that why there's such a friendly, fond connection with the Japanese culture, because it's very respectful. The English, on the whole, are very respectful people, helpful people, and have a sense of right and wrong. But honour has to mean something to you, otherwise it doesn't work. I have to say, I find that very attractive as a trait, as a sort of characteristic within the Japanese society. And I'm sure it's an individual thing, but when I see it in a culture such as Japan, I think it reassures something inside me. Fascinating. Thank you for Shogun. Thank you for finding it.
Yeah.
Arigato.
You're welcome. どういたしました。はい。どういたしました。
Okay, bye-bye.